I'm Granny Charlotte, and tonight we're going to be reading chapter 21 of Little Pilgrim's Progress. But we have a couple of vocabulary words. Our first word tonight is actually the name of a fellow. It's called false hope. And false hope is when you're thinking and feeling something is true when it just might not be true. False hope. And our other word, this is the third time we've had this word, but I think it's important. The word or the name of the fellow is ignorance. Ignorance seems to be popping up a lot in this book. Ignorance, again, is not having any facts or knowledge about somebody or something, or when you just don't know anything about something. Ignorance. All right, let's get reading. When Ignorance entered the land of delight, the people who met him spoke kindly to him as they had done to Christian and Hopeful. But they soon found out that he was not a true pilgrim and that he did not care to talk to them, so they left him to himself. He passed by the gate of the king's gardens, but the gardeners did not invite him to come in. And the Shining Ones, although they often watched him as he walked along, did not speak to him or give him any gracious message from the king. At last he came to the brink of the dark river. He could see the walls of the celestial city on the other side, and he knew that his journey would not be ended until he had crossed that water. He stood for a few minutes, wondering what he should do, and then he just laid down on the grass. I will rest a little, he thought, and perhaps someone else will be coming presently. I do not see any bridge, so there must be a boat to carry the pilgrims over. There was a boat, but it belonged to the wicked prince, and the king's pilgrims never used it. The boatman, whose name was False Hope, soon saw Ignorance lying upon the bank and rowed towards him. It's time for you to go over the river, he said. I have brought my boat for you. Ignorance was pleased, and he got up at once, saying, I suppose the king sent you. Yes, replied the man. The water is not very deep in some places, and many pilgrims try to walk through it. But there is no need to do so, because I am already ready to take them over. He held out his hand, and Ignorance took it and stepped down into the boat. Then False Hope caught up his oars and rowed quickly across the rough water. And here's a picture of Ignorance in the boat with False Hope, one of the wicked prince's servants. Well, what shall I do now? Asked Ignorance when he climbed up the opposite bank. False Hope pointed to a little winding path. That is the best way, he said. It is smooth and easy. If the Shining Ones had come to meet you, they would have taken you by another road, which is steep and difficult to climb. Go straight up to the gate, and you will soon find your way to the king's palace. He pushed his boat off from the shore, and Ignorance turned around and began to climb up the hill toward the city. He did not meet anyone, and when he reached the gates, he found that they were closed. He looked up and saw some words written upon the archway in letters of gold. And here's what it said: Those who do the king's commandments may enter the gates to the city. Well, thought Ignorance, I have obeyed the king always, and he knocked at the gate. He quite forgot that the king had desired his pilgrims to begin their journey at the wicket gate and to travel by the way of the cross. He had heard this many times, but he'd not cared about it, and so the king's blessing could not be given to him. He knocked twice, but no one opened the gates. Presently, one of the king's servants came to the top of the archway, and when he saw Ignorance, he said, "Where do you come from, and why are you knocking at the king's gate?" "I am a pilgrim," replied the boy. "I have just crossed the river, and I wish to live in the celestial city." "I will take your roll," said the king's servant, "and carry it to my master." Ignorance knew that he had never received a roll, but he put his hands in the folds of his clothes and pretended to feel for it. The king's servant waited a little while, but at last he said, "I'm afraid you've come without one." Then he went down from the gate to ask the king what he should do. Poor Ignorance stood outside, and now he began to wish that he had not been so careless about his journey. "The city is so beautiful," he thought. "I should like to have lived here always, and I'm afraid they will not let me go in." Then 2 of the Shining Ones came quickly and bound the hands and feet of the foolish boy and carried him away from the celestial city into the country of the wicked prince. His cruel master rejoiced when he was brought back and took care that he should never again have a chance of escaping. And here's a picture of the Shining Ones with Ignorance. Ignorance is kind of regretting his decisions here. "It was your own fault," he said, when he found Ignorance crying bitterly at the thought of his lost happiness. "If you had really wished to live with the king, you should have done exactly as he told you." Well, and that concludes our reading for tonight. And tonight it was all about ignorance. Well, children, wash your hands, brush your teeth, and eat an ice chip. I'm going to have a nice spearmint ice chip. Don't be ignorant about your dental health, children.